Our experience over the decades has enabled us to prepare, and let me tell you, it comes from being on jobs. It comes from seeing things go good, bad, and everything in between, to where to
Yeah.
where the distillate of those experiences, the aggregate product of those experiences, as it gets put into, for example, a data sheet, is going to be very helpful to the end user. So that is invaluable. There's so much that they can gain from that experience by having somebody convey the details and the methodology and what is required. And then when they see it work like they have, that's when you take the mystique and what I like to call the voodoo out of it. And it's very tangible, very technical, very proven work and systems that get employed.
I'm telling you, you will love this conversation like I do. My guest, Christopher Coderre, Technical Sales Manager at SealBoss Concrete Solutions, has loads of experience in providing solutions to concrete repair professionals. He and the team at SealBoss have distilled decades of experience and put it into technical datasheets that are available for free. So, in this episode, we get into how you can use this data and insights to demystify concrete repair and take your concrete injection game to the next level. Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Matuz, I'm doing fine. Thank you. Appreciate it. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. It's 5:40 p.m. here in Warsaw, Poland. What's the time at your place? Can you say?
Yeah, it's 8:40 Pacific Standard Time here in the United States in California.
So I assume that you are drinking your second coffee.
Still on my first, about halfway
Okay.
down, but yeah, absolutely.
All right. I had 4 coffees today, so this time
Oh, boy.
I'm staying with water and a tea.
There you go. Terrific.
I think it's too late for the 5th one today. So yeah, enjoy your coffee.
Likewise.
Great. I have invited you for this conversation on the podcast called "The Concrete Injection Made Easy," because we have a great topic today. But before we dive into this, can you tell to our listeners about yourself, about your company a little bit?
Sure, Matuz, not a problem at all. My name is Chris Coderre, and for the SealBoss organization here, I manage the Western region. So I have responsibility to maintain and build the business and train and educate the contractors on the proper use of our materials in 13 states.
Mhm.
And I also handle the same set of responsibilities for Western Canada in both British Columbia and Alberta. And occasionally I find myself down in the Southern Hemisphere in support of our distribution partner in the country of Australia. So yeah, that's what I do for the organization.
Wow. So it seems that you travel a lot.
When pre-COVID, yes, I was on a plane at least once a month, sometimes twice, in support of our distribution partners and projects as well, where contractors have a need to receive the proper training to be able to get their jobs done correctly. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So at least one time a month in a plane, visiting your clients, visiting your sales rep, your coworkers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and all connected to injections or something else as well.
Both. So one thing about our organization is we have several product families that we offer. Certainly the focus is the water stop injection resins and systems. We've been at that game for well over 3 decades. And we have a nice breadth of product lines and equipment and accessories. But yeah, we also have some other lines that could require training and myself in a certain area outside of our home base here in Santa Ana. And so, yeah, it's not always surrounding water stop injection. It could be structural epoxy injection. It could be floor repair. Yes, to just name a couple others. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I can tell you a quick story about how I came across the SealBoss brand.
Okay.
It was like, let's say that I know about your existence for a couple of years, even though I'm from Europe, so we don't have this possibility to buy your products. At least I didn't use it, I have to admit, and not even once. But in the beginning of this year, I was asked by my Polish client that has some business in Australia to help them to choose the right product and to produce the whole technology of injecting the sheet pile walls. And then they told me that they are going to buy resin over there in Australia, so they are not going to buy it directly from me in Warsaw, and then they are not going to take it, to ship it to Australia. I sold them 1K pump, and my 1K pump from Warsaw was shipped to Australia. So I felt like I was sending a Pathfinder to Mars, really, because it's still there. It won't come back like Pathfinder. I really doubt that they are going to bring it back ever back to Earth. And
Right.
it was supposed to do some job over there. So exactly like this Pathfinder analogy it fits perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was asked to prepare this, the solution, the technology step by step. I did it. And in the end, I had to choose the right resin. And I was given like 2 or 3 different manufacturers to choose from. And I have chosen the SealBoss 1570 resin. And why? And this why is exactly the topic of our conversation, because all the information I have found on your technical data sheet, you call it the product data sheet, but anyway, it's exactly the same. All the information I needed to find, I have found, and I could imagine how the resin works even without touching the resin. And then when the job was done, I got the feedback from these guys that they were running the injection, that the resin I have chosen, and I told them step by step what to do, performed exactly as it's supposed to. So our topic today is what makes a data sheet a good one to help you to sell the product and to help me as an applicator to choose the right product. That's it.
Yeah, that's a great topic, Matuz, and it's one that we encounter here as a team often. To answer the question, let's focus. You asked what makes a data sheet a good one so that somebody can look at it, review it, analyze some of the physical property data that's listed, and ultimately make a decision on what resin is going to be chosen to perform the duties that the job requires. Our data sheets, what we strive to do in our data sheets is keep it as concise as possible, yet as informative as possible. It's kind of our philosophy that if we need to have something that's voluminous and multi-page with data that's requisite, that's fine. But when it does not have to be like that, we don't really see the value in it. So ultimately, if we can format something, and this has a lot to do with just the way humans behave as well in terms of their eye and how their eye gets drawn to certain parts of whatever is on a page, we like to try to keep our data sheets very friendly to the eye. Now, there are a lot of numbers and facts and figures, but we try to keep things organized. We try to keep things aligned physically to the eye. So that's step one. Step two is populating the data sheet, Matuz, with relevant information. Yeah. So there are testing criteria that some engineers, for reasons that a lot of times are kept to themselves, and rightly so, that they need to see on that data sheet. There are also the 2 or 3 aspects of a resin's physical properties that are on a data sheet that usually are focused upon immediately. Reaction time being one of them, viscosity being another. And this is just in my experience. Those 2 things are oftentimes, just like I said, very, very much then immediately focused on to make the determination of, okay, based on this, for example, in a crack injection scenario, if you've got cracks that are very fine and very tight, you're obviously going to want to choose a resin whose centipoise is as low as it can be, so that you can drive that material deep into the substrate and get that reaction to occur deep into the substrate and give yourself that integral seal that is going to be permanent, and it's not just a band-aid, as it were, in the industry, quote unquote. The other thing is, of course, the reaction time. When you have products like, you had mentioned a certain resin, and this resin is catalyzed, so there's an extra chemical component that's added to this base resin. Well, by adjusting the amount of that catalyst that you put into the base resin, what you can do is either cause that resin to react quicker or slower. And that becomes very instrumental when sealing off leaks as well, because in an emergency type of a leak where the flow rate is very excessive and you've got something that's a bit of an emergency and categorized as such, you might want to maximize the amount allowable of that catalyst into that base resin so that you have a cutoff type of a grout immediately. In other scenarios where, let's say, you've got a very thick concrete substrate, we find that being able to lower that amount of accelerator, obviously, as it's added to the base resin, is very, very instrumental in allowing that resin to be able to travel, okay, and allow it to find its distance into the substrate and then react. So it gets into the deep root cause of the issue. And that's what we find is very important. So getting back to the data sheet, those types of things that are on there, so your reaction times and your viscosities and your percentages of accelerator that will lead to certain reaction times and induction times, we find those pieces of information to be the most paramount when assessing a data sheet for specification on a project.
So I see it like from the applicator's point of view, it looks like I knew quite well what was the problem, and I've seen the same problems here in Poland. So I didn't have to use so much my imagination to really understand what is the solution. But then I needed to be sure that this resin will perform as I know other producers' products. Yeah. So I was looking for something that is similar, and then my situation was there was a water leaking, but it wasn't a heavy leakage. So this resin didn't have to be so fast. I knew that I'm going to use 1K pump, so I needed the resin that is going to be pumped using this equipment. As I know that the leakage was in this connections between the sheet pile walls segments, so I know that I don't need the lowest possible viscosity because the spacing to be filled were quite big. So yeah, that's it. And then I knew that since there is quite warm over there, I need to be able to add a little bit less this activator so the resin won't react too fast. At the same time, the pump make this resin warmer while working. So this, reaction times is going to be faster with this additional amount of heat. And all of this information is necessary to choose the right resin. And then you just compare what you know and what you have on site with what you can find on the technical data sheet. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's a very good collection of points, Matuz, and I sincerely appreciate your willingness to be able to assess the conditions. So our philosophy here, pardon me, when we deal with any given customer, or as we work with our distribution partners worldwide, one of the biggest things that we focus on is the educational aspect of it. There's a bit of a kind of a three-step process. The first thing we encourage our new employees to get on board mentally is when someone calls in, there's a good chance that the majority of the people calling in are relatively new to these technologies and these processes and these systems. So folks like myself and you and others in the industry, we have the ability to kind of have at the ready a set of answers that are probably going to be used multiple times to answer the questions on a daily basis that come in from our customers. But getting back to what you just described there, Matuz, that is the essence, okay, of what we try to do. And the educational aspect, where the first thing you should seek to do is help whoever is calling in. So when you have the philosophy of how can I help this person, the next step is, okay, based on their application and based on whatever we can provide from our arsenal of total system solutions to include accessories and pumps and resins, what can we then pair with the application at hand so that we can give this a very, very good effort and have the outcome be successful. And in this case, it would be stopping the unwanted leak, through the concrete structure. The very last step is the procurement. If steps 1 and 2 are fulfilled, it's almost by default that step 3 in the procurement of the material will occur. And we think that when you try to lead and flip things on their head a little bit and try to get the procurement to be the focus, it's not really, in this industry anyway, what people want to hear and want to talk about. This is the beauty, and I tell people this, the beauty about what I do is yes, I may have regional sales manager as my title, and titles, everyone's got opinions about titles. That's for another topic and another day. But ultimately, if I can serve as a solutions provider, if I can help somebody first, it's that procurement thing that's 2 steps down below that, that's going to happen most likely. And at least we hope so, right? But this is a technical industry. This is a very procedure-intensive industry, which leads me to just another thing, if I may, Matuz, and that is teaching contractors how to employ these systems and making sure that they know the difference between hydrophobic and hydrophilic, when to use a water stop, when to use a structural high modulus low viscosity epoxy. These are very, very important things. And I have to say, and I've touched on this on some of our episodes with guests that we've had on our podcast, making sure that the engineering community as well is aware of when to use what is so very important. So, listening to what you said about, seeing what you had in terms of an in situ condition, and then being able to look at the data sheet and assess the information on that to make the determination that, hey, this is the resin that we're going to want to use. That's fantastic.
When I was new to this industry, it wasn't so long a time ago, because it was 2011. I worked for the one of the European manufacturers, and I was trained in Germany. And they were putting this one most important aspect is asking questions, and once again asking and trying to understand as much as possible of the cause of the situation. What was the cause of the situation, of the leakage, of this crack, or concrete damage, and so on. And then according to this, finding the best possible solution without understanding what's going on the job site, and without asking questions to people that may have seen what happened, or may have, even to the people who may have made some mistakes. It's really, really helpful. So without this, we can only, paint it, and, without any other possibility to really repair it.
Yeah.
I don't know how does it look like on your market, in your place, but it is really often that I came to a job site and I see a crack that was painted with some cementitious, something I don't really even know what. And then people are, in shock, because this crack obviously within a month starts to leak again. And they tell me that, they paid some money to have this crack repaired and it still leaks. So they don't believe in the technology. They don't believe in injections. So this is my point. I share my knowledge, and that is why I started the podcast, to really convince people that don't know injections at all, or they don't like it anymore because they failed. They've seen the failure of somebody else's work. This is like my main goal, because if I manage to convince people that this injection really works, it makes that this whole pie of the whole market of the injections will be increased. It will be bigger and bigger, because the more people understand that it works, the more people will really try to use these advantages of the advantages of injections solutions. So I think we managed to do it on the job site I told you at the beginning of our conversation, because they actually, I can tell you that they were really surprised that I didn't have to go there and see the situation, and I was still able to give them the right solution step by step, including this choice of the resin.
Well, Matuz, that's something that I can't agree more. I think it's wonderful that you pointed that out. We find ourselves in that situation quite often. Earlier on in the podcast, we talked about, or I mentioned the territory that I cover. Pardon me. And one of the key aspects of it, we touch on this educational aspect of it again. As I travel on the western side of the U.S., we're very distribution heavy in terms of the model that we try to employ and grow in the market with. Part of that, a very core part of that, is when I land in any given geography. I don't care if it's Portland or Seattle or Denver or Phoenix or Vancouver or Calgary, it doesn't matter. What I try to do is get my distribution partners at least on a level where, as the questions come in that are very general from people who are new to this kind of injection technology, that those individuals at our distribution partnerships, the people working the desk, the people out on the streets making the calls, and boots on the ground, have a baseline level of knowledge to where they can solve the problem, go to the job site, and then the most important part is the support. As I speak to you right now, and you're in Poland and I'm here in the US, we are thousands of miles apart, yet technology enables us to communicate. In that same vein, I have used personally FaceTime, teleconferencing, Skype, just to name a few technologies, to be able to convey the technical details, the very nitty-gritty, as it were, of what one needs to do to be successful on a job. And I can't tell you how much I echo your sentiments about taking this mystique of injection and just reforming the game. There are a lot of tenured veterans to grouting as a whole, that have a very skeptical view still
Yeah.
about chemical grout injection. And I encourage anyone listeners out there, I encourage you all and implore you to be more open minded to the people that take the time to learn what it is that's necessary for the applicators to do in the field. This solution and these technologies work. I've seen it firsthand. And when you prove, like in Matuz, you're saying, when the job gets done and done right, there's a very good satisfaction and a very good feeling that comes from that as a manufacturer's representative, as a technical representative. And again, every job is different. Let me be very clear in saying that yes, there are smart ways to attack big leaks, and we have done that. I've personally done it, and it's very rewarding. However, some of the smallest leaks sometimes can be very challenging
And very
because of,
tricky. Yeah.
yeah, very tricky,
Actually,
unforeseen,
actually,
everything.
I have to agree. Sometimes it's maybe it sounds peculiar, but it's easier to stop a huge leak than get rid of this the leftovers, this little wet what stays in the masonry. Yeah, so because it takes time to get dry of this masonry, and people don't understand this, and maybe there was some problem, like not the problem, uh, the mistake was made before, and no one knows it, and then this wall stays wet. There is no
Yeah,
leakage, but it's
yeah,
wet, and no one likes it as it is. So it's easier to stop a huge leak than to get rid of the small amount of water. Yeah.
yeah. And to your point of being on jobs where people will complain about maybe having a cementitious parge or something like that struck on a wall, I can't agree more. I've been to several jobs throughout the years where I've gone to underground parking structures as an example, and it's not funny, but it's interesting as well, where you'll see, yes, those technologies that have been employed. And let me be very clear, those, I think there's a very good opportunity
Hmm.
for the different manufacturers to start to have more synergy and to work together, where maybe injection coupled with something like a cementitious application on the surface, that should be, I think, considered more often by engineering firms in terms of the spec to be written to fully solve a leak problem if needed, especially from a standpoint of aesthetics. But going back, I've even seen parking structures, Matuz, where attempts at injection have occurred where packer placement, just as an example, is completely awry. Now, there are different means and methods that can be employed, but I maintain and recommend only after the prescribed methodology. For example, what we have is a very nice spelled out. It's about an 11-page document. It's our chemical grouting and leak stop guidelines, where we
Hmm.
get into the very intricate details with respect to dimensions for drilling and all these other types of things that will give any installer the best fighting chance at being successful. Now, deviation from that can be entertained afterward, subsequent to the initial injection effort, if needed. But some of these out of the gate attempts that I've witnessed have just, it baffles me. I scratch my head and I say, well, where did they learn? And it doesn't make the installer a bad installer. They could be very, very good with the best of tools, but it's like anything else. You have to know how to use. I mean, if you don't know how to use anything, um, you're not going to be successful. That goes for machines. That goes for automotive. I mean, it could be anything in this world. If it's a device or if it's a system, or a set of methods that need to be followed and adhered to, deviation from that at the onset could lead to undesirable outcomes. Very, very simply stated.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you that 2 months ago, maybe 1.5, we were about, and we did it. We were repairing the crack that were leaking, and of course there was some previous attempt of injection. We've seen some holes, old packers, old resin, and this spacing between packers was too big. The angles were terrible. They were starting to drill exactly into the crack. So when they put the pucker inside the hole, the pucker was already like passes the crack. So no possibility to inject into the crack. So
very important to follow that method.
And so on and so on, so on. And in the end, this the client, hired us because someone convinced him that we are able to repair it. But in the end, it was like, come on, but you were drilling, you were mixing resin, and you were injecting. So you were doing exactly the same step as the previous guys a couple of months earlier. So what the heck? Where's the difference?
Right.
So, there was only one big, huge difference. Like now the crack is sealed.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That makes a difference. That makes a difference.
That's great.
But these rules you mentioned, we really followed the rules. Like we knew exactly where is the crack. We knew exactly what's the thickness of this concrete slab. We knew exactly where to start to drill. We knew exactly at what angle we should drill to pass the old holes, to what spacing between the holes to keep, what kind of resin to use, how to mix it, and so on and so on and so on. And terrific. So I'm not very surprised that we managed to seal this crack. I'm surprised that these people who had hired us in the end, even seeing that the crack is sealed, couldn't notice the difference between what we've done and what had been done before.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that too, Matuz, if you think about a building owner or a client as it is, very important, if they're open to it, is to give them at least the chance to hear what people like us have to say about the technologies, how they're employed, and what they ultimately do. And recently, no better example comes to mind. I had the good fortune of being able to travel and support a distribution partner of ours in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And we sat with some folks that had a need for injection in a building, and they just were completely brand new to it. And they had the luxury of somebody on staff that was going to be their installer. So they did not have to outsource the contractor. But having those 3 or 4 people in the room and having a big whiteboard in front of me where I can do my very best to explain the technology and show how it works, that is invaluable. There's so much that they can gain from that experience by having somebody convey the details and the methodology and what is required. And then when they see it work like they have, that's when you take the mystique and what I like to call the voodoo out of it. And it's very tangible, very technical, very proven work and systems that get employed. So I agree with you 100%, Matuz. You've got very, very good points in that regard.
Okay, coming back to the technical data sheet.
Yeah.
There are 2 more points that convinced me to choose this resin, not the other one. One of them is that there are, of course, one component and only one component resins that react with water, and then they stop the water. End of discussion. But what if there is no water? Like we had these leakages here and there, but in between there was no water. So I didn't want to, uh, taking the risk that some of the resin won't react if it will happen that in some of the spacing there won't be any water to react to start this reaction. So this resin we are discussing is yes, it says that it's water activated, but at the same time we got this component B that will ensure us that the reaction will take place if the water is not there, and this is exactly what I needed. Do you think that people see this difference between these two kinds of reaction resins? This, both of them are being injected using 1K pump, but the reaction is different.
We do see that occasionally, Matuz, and I'll say that the resin being spoken about here is one that is hydroactive, but again, because there's an accelerator involved, what that accelerator does on a chemical basis is kind of excites that base resin to want to come in contact with moisture, and once that moisture, it's almost like a three ingredient cake we're baking here, right? You've got your base resin, you've got your accelerator. Those are mixed together. Yeah, exactly. But that base and that accelerator are mixed together and then pumped into the substrate. Then we need water. We need water, either the problem water, as they call it, or the nuisance water. That's our issue that we're trying to solve. Or if it is dry, you can prehydrate. And we run into this quite a bit when construction schedules don't always coincide with weather events or seasons. So let's take, for example, a very dry part of our world here in the U.S. Let's take Arizona. Granted, there are monsoons in the summertime, but by general rule, I mean, the namesake of the state it translates to dry land, right? And so the idea is, if you do not have that water, but yet you want to employ a resin like this, you can, prior to putting your packer in, or even when your packer is in, you can hydrate. So you can get a dedicated water pump or some type of conveyance means to get water into those drill holes and into the crack, because the truth is, Matuz, very little water is necessary. Once a little bit of water encounters that mixed batch of base resin and accelerator, that polymerization occurs, and once that chain reaction starts, it's all over. You're going to get a nice closed cell compression seal type of a foam to occur and to form in that crack. Getting back to the crux of your question, the two different types. So in our world, we've got either hydroactive or dry reactive, and there are different products that can be assigned based on what you would like to do. And this also ties into a point you'd mentioned several minutes ago with respect to some of the easier ones are where you've got big leaks, and some of the tougher jobs are where you've got this residual moisture that's starting to show itself over and over. What we tend to find, and the European method of specification that we have tried to make more prevalent here in the United States, is where you attack any given leaking job on a two-step basis. The first is getting what we like to call a bit of a cutoff grout. So something that is comprised of a base resin and an accelerator. Those mix together, you get them in a pump, you shoot them in. That would handle, let's just throw a round number at it. Let's say that handles 95% of the leak problem. In Europe, for decades, they have typically written specifications across the board to then include a subsequent follow-up injection with a much more low viscosity type of a resin. Oftentimes, this can be a two-component one-to-one, but with even a mixed viscosity of below 100 centipoise that does not require any moisture. So what we're doing there in that case, Matuz, is we're fine-tuning and making the last adjustments and filling in the very fine micro fissures and things like that within the substrate so as to provide a complete seal. We're getting in there. We're doing our requisite duties to get that last 5% or whatever it might be sealed up and tightened up. So with respect to, what we see in people wanting the two different resins, yeah, it's very advantageous for a material manufacturer to offer those types of product lines within their arsenal of offerings, so that you're not just a one-trick pony. You can have other options available to you to come in and fine-tune. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's it. In our case, like even I said at the beginning that there is no water, but we had the strong leakage, and so even though I wanted to make sure that this resin will react, and that is why I have chosen this resin with an accelerator. The ground was filled with water, so there was a huge amount of humidity around it. So
Yeah.
like I can assure you that the reaction took place as it was supposed to. The other point is that it says that in this part called the installation guidelines, that let me read this. Do not mix more material than the amount that will be pumped within reasonable time. And this is exactly what I like, because I encourage my employees to mix as small amount of resin as possible, and like up to 200 milliliters, which is less than a glass of water at one time. And why? Because when we are discussing the moment injecting into the crack, where we do not need a huge amount of resin at the time, because the crack is small and it takes time to really, inject this resin into the substrate, as you explained a couple of minutes ago. So if you mix this small amount, the resin will stay fresh. The resin will stay low viscous. The time of reaction will be long enough to be sure that you will use the whole amount of resin mixed. On the other, like taking this from this perspective, like people mix 2 kg of resin. What if something wrong with the pump? You simply use this 2 kg of resin, and the reaction is faster, because the more resin you use, the reaction is faster, because the temperature rises.
That's right.
So,
heat of reaction. Yeah.
So this one simple sentence put over here, means that someone who has prepared this technical datasheet really knew, and like it gives me the impression that this person knew what to do, and this person was present during the injection on the job site. Yeah, this is like that was my idea when I was reading this document.
Well, we appreciate that those kind words, Matuz. And yes, just stating fact and by no means conveying any hubris or arrogance whatsoever. We've been at this for over 3 decades. This is our specialty. This is our focus, and by no means are we perfect. But I will say that our experience over the decades has enabled us to prepare, and let me tell you, it comes from being on jobs. It comes from seeing things go good, bad, and everything in between, to where to where the distillate of those experiences, the aggregate product of those experiences, as it gets put into, for example, a data sheet, is going to be very helpful to the end user. So touching on that theme again, overall, this kind of common thread of a theme throughout this episode is proper installation via the education and telling people how to do things. So yeah, the small batches at a time. Absolutely. Unless an installer, and again, every job is different, I will caveat, but unless an installer has confidence that he or she can get large quantities into the substrate at a time without issues, then it's very wise to make small batches. And for no other reason than, like you were stating earlier, your viscosity will be consistent if, for example, they're installing in cooler temperatures. If you have, let's say, 6 liters at a time or something like that, it's possible that the cooler temperature could start to cause the viscosity to increase on that batch that you have in that hopper.
Yeah.
So yeah, that aspect of the data sheet it conveys a technical savvy, if you will, as it relates to the proper install guideline. Yeah.
So in the end, I think we can agree that well-written technical data sheet, helps me as a client, as an applicator, to choose the right product. And at the same time, this well-written, well-prepared technical data sheet helps you to sell it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for a data sheet that can be presented. And again, in my opinion, it's kind of, society these days is very instant gratification. There's not a lot of people who favor mulling through pages and pages and pages of documentation. If you're going to present something, in my opinion and experience anyway, and this doesn't make it true for everybody throughout the world, but in what I've seen, if you're going to present a data sheet, for example, to a specifying engineer, they have a lot to do. They are looking at multiple jobs at a time. They're working countless hours. They're buried in details from job to job to job. The last thing they're going to want to do is have to mull through, 15 to 20 pages worth of a document. Now, excuse me, if you present them with a clear, concise, formatted, and organized document that they can quickly glance at, pardon me, to gain the knowledge requisite to have the confidence to specify that product, that's the game. That's to us what we are trying to do. And we understand that, and that's why we try to do as good a job as we can on making the data sheets that we provide concise. Now, as a supplement to that, and to expand on that data sheet, we then offer something like our guidelines. And the guidelines, those are a little more voluminous. Those do have several more pages, but then at that point in time, the goal is to, once somebody has digested and understood those guidelines, Matus, with the data sheet plus those guidelines, and this rings true for the engineering community as well, you can get somebody up to speed, excuse me, relatively quickly with a data sheet and a guideline so that the specification is written with confidence. And that's where we erode some of that doubt. That's where we take away, that's where we take away some of the mystique about chemical grout injection is kind of not being legitimate, where in fact it very much is. When you can provide these data sheets, these guidelines, and educate and have people that can stand behind it, that makes all the difference. And so yeah, I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, thank you. So I was reading this document during a day, so it was a night at your place. So it even saved you from waking you up if I wanted to call you to ask some additional questions.
Yeah. So, we're here at any time to help you out.
Well, even while you sleep, I think I doubt that.
That's why they have voicemail, right?
I see, but I wouldn't get this instant answer, and understanding this gave me the answer almost immediately.
Yep.
So I think we have shown to our listeners that technical datasheet can be written in, let's say, almost an interesting way and good looking way. So it won't be a waste of time to have a look at this and at least to understand what kind of product we are going to use and how to use it and what to expect when using a given product. So yeah, so we encourage everyone to really have a look at this and to understand it. And if something is not clear enough, to ask questions to be sure that it won't be too late, because when the water is flowing, that there is no time to to read this. You have to read this before.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very good point.
Okay. Do you think we have covered everything we wanted? Like, I think so.
I sure do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely.
So if there are any additional questions, we are waiting for it. We are going to answer all the questions. If I get some questions from our listeners, I will, send you those so you can also help me to answer.
Absolutely.
And talk to you soon, because I am really convinced that we will be able to find some other good topics about injection is interesting. So we are going to find another topics to really have another interviews. What do you say?
Wonderful, Matuz. Well, it's a pleasure from all of us here at the team. We would just like to extend our thanks for having us on your show. We know that time is at a premium. Yeah, and we really appreciate that. So enjoy the rest of your week, Matuz. And yeah, for our listeners, if there's anything we can do to help out, please let us know.
Thank you very much for the conversation and for the time. All the best to you and your team. See you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
As I was putting together the audio of my conversation with Christopher, I was again struck by how valuable his insights are. There is so much great information from this episode, so if you want to get a huge dose of knowledge about the concrete injection, this episode is just for you. You can literally start learning by understanding the datasheets that are available for free, just like this podcast. So tune in, subscribe, and take your concrete injection business to new heights.